In this third episode, well, we're diving deep into the world of visual communication, specifically looking at the underlying structures, the things that bring clarity and order to everything, from, a simple flyer right up to complex exhibition spaces.
Right. And you shared this fascinating book with us by Josef Müller-Brockmann.
Exactly. Think of this as your personal cheat sheet, maybe, to understanding the power of the grid.
It really is. Josef Müller-Brockmann's grid systems, it's not just about, making things look neat, is it?
No, not at all.
It gets into the fundamental principles of how we organize visual information, whether that's on a page, a screen, or even, in a physical space. It's about a specific way of thinking, really, that can make communication much more effective for you.
Yeah, it's presented as this very thoughtful, very structured approach to solving communication problems visually. And Müller-Brockmann himself, he's a legend, right? A central figure in the whole Swiss school of graphic design.
Oh, absolutely. He was known for his incredibly clear, sort of objective, rational approach to design. His work really emphasized getting the message across with maximum clarity and, well, minimal fuss.
Okay, so in this deep dive, we're going to try and unpack the core ideas behind these grid systems. We'll explore where the ideas even came from, which I found surprisingly interesting, actually.
Yeah, the history is quite revealing.
And then look at how they're used, in the real world. Our goal is really to give you a solid understanding of this powerful tool and maybe, hopefully, give you a few aha moments as you look at the visual world around you.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the philosophy behind the grid. It sounds like, more than just a design technique.
You're right, it is. For Müller-Brockmann, the grid system wasn't just a tool. It was more like an expression of a designer's whole attitude.
Attitude? How so?
Like a commitment to being constructive and ethical in their work. It's about taking responsibility, for making information clear and accessible.
So it's not just about making things look good, but about a deeper sense of purpose in how we communicate.
Precisely. He believed that working systematically, following these quite rigorous visual principles, it addresses a fundamental need for things to be, well, right and understandable.
Right.
These are values that, they extend beyond just design. They're important in how we function as a society, really.
That's a pretty profound idea. So what are the core desires or motivations that lead designers to adopt grid systems in the first place?
Müller-Brockmann identified several key drivers. First, there's the desire to bring order and clarity to information, to really distill the message down to its essence.
Okay.
Then there's the push for objectivity, focusing on the information itself, rather than, say, personal preference or style.
Makes sense.
And, of course, the need to make creative and production processes more, well, efficient and profitable.
Efficiency is always good. What else motivated this approach?
He also talks about the desire to integrate all the different elements of a design, things like color, shape, material, into a cohesive whole.
Okay.
There's the idea of having an almost architectural control over space, whether that's on a page or in a three-dimensional environment. And importantly, he saw it as reflecting a positive sort of forward-thinking attitude linked to the importance of education and thoughtful, constructive work.
It sounds like the grid is almost a set of guiding principles for design. But, for someone who thinks of themselves as very creative, could this system feel limiting? Does it stifle originality?
That's a really valid question. And it might seem that way initially, yeah.
Right.
But Müller-Brockmann argued the opposite, that a strong grid actually provides a solid foundation for creativity.
How so?
Think of it like the structure of a building, maybe. The framework doesn't dictate exactly what the rooms look like, does it? But it provides this stability to build something meaningful and lasting. The grid offers a framework for effective communication, allowing creativity to flourish within those parameters.
Okay, that makes sense. So the structure is there to support and enhance the message, not necessarily restrict it. And you mentioned a connection between the systematic approach and broader societal values.
Yes. Müller-Brockmann believed that when information is presented in a clear, logical way, which is what a grid helps you do, it fosters understanding and trust. And these are essential for any, well-functioning society. In his view, using a grid meant embracing these sort of universally applicable principles of visual order.
All right, so it's a philosophy rooted in clarity, order, and even a sense of responsibility. Now let's get into the more practical side of things. What are the actual purposes and, the tangible benefits of using a grid?
Okay, yeah. On a practical level, Grids offer significant advantages when it comes to organizing both text and images.
Hmm.
Müller-Brockmann highlights two key benefits.
Yeah.
One is economy, meaning it's generally a faster and more cost-effective way to solve design problems.
Right, saving time and money. Always a plus.
Exactly. And the second is a rational approach, which leads to consistent and logical solutions, whether you're dealing with something simple or really quite complex.
Okay. But what about the person on the receiving end, the reader or the viewer? How does the grid benefit them directly?
This is where the real power of the grid comes in, I think.
Okay.
Müller-Brockmann emphasizes the cognitive advantages for the audience. Information organized with a grid is simply faster and easier to read.
Faster and easier.
Yeah. This leads to better comprehension and, importantly, improved retention of the information. He even cites this as being scientifically proven, actually.
Well,
Think about trying to read a website with text just jumping all over the place versus one with a clear, structured layout. You'll understand and remember the information much better in the second case, right?
that's a powerful point. So a well-designed grid isn't just visually appealing. It actually helps us process and remember information more effectively.
Exactly. By creating a clear visual hierarchy and a consistent structure, the grid reduces what psychologists call cognitive load.
Okay.
It basically frees up the reader's mental energy to focus on the content itself, rather than struggling to make sense of a chaotic layout.
And beyond individual documents or websites, what role do grids play for larger entities like companies or organizations?
Oh, grids are absolutely invaluable for creating a strong and consistent visual identity for any organization.
Right, the branding aspect.
Totally. From something as small as a business card, something as large as an exhibition stand, a well-defined grid system ensures that all communication materials feel related, reinforcing the brand and creating a unified impression. It's about speaking with one visual voice, really, across all platforms.
So it's about creating a visual language that's consistent and instantly recognizable. That makes perfect sense for building a strong brand. Now let's take a step back in time for a moment. You mentioned the historical roots of grid systems earlier. Where did these ideas first emerge?
Well, while the modern grid system really solidified in post-World War II Switzerland, Müller-Brockmann points out that the groundwork was laid much earlier, back in the 1920s.
The 20s. Wow.
In several European countries, actually.
Mhm.
Germany, Holland, the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and of course, Switzerland itself.
What was happening in those places during that period that led to this kind of structured thinking and design?
There was a significant movement happening in typography, graphic design, and photography towards more objective and functional approaches.
Okay.
Designers were experimenting with new ways of organizing information, prioritizing clarity and efficiency over the more decorative styles that were common before. It was kind of a reaction against the more traditional ornamental approaches.
So it was a deliberate move away from the purely decorative towards something more functional and, well, objective.
Precisely. There was this growing desire for maximum order and economy in how type was used. This early emphasis on efficiency and structure and typography was really the precursor to the more formalized grid systems we know today.
Right.
The Swiss designers after the war really took these earlier explorations and refined them into a comprehensive system.
Fascinating. So it evolved from this real need for clarity and efficiency. Now let's get down to the specifics. The key elements involved in actually constructing a grid. It sounds like there are quite a few factors to consider, starting with something as fundamental as paper formats.
Absolutely. Müller-Brockmann dedicates a whole section to paper formats, particularly highlighting the IIN standard paper sizes, which are widely used in Europe.
Like A4.
Exactly. A4 is the most common. He emphasizes their logical proportional relationships. An A4 sheet folded in half becomes an A5 sheet. Fold that, you get A6, and so on.
All right.
This makes for really efficient use of paper and also makes it easier for recipients to store and organize documents. He mentions the A series for general documents, the B series often used for posters, C for envelopes, and D sometimes for technical stuff.
That proportional system sounds incredibly practical, doesn't it? What about the standard paper sizes used more in North America? How do they compare?
Yeah, the North American standards, like the common letter size, 8.5 by 11 inches. They have different proportions than the DIN A4 size, which is 29.7 by 21 centimeters.
Oh, okay.
Letter size is a bit wider and shorter. And this difference in proportion, it can definitely influence the layout and how content sort of naturally fits onto the page within a grid.
Interesting. So even the basic shape of the paper has implications for the grid. What's the next key element? Typographic measurement systems? That sounds quite technical.
It can seem that way, but it's pretty essential for understanding how type is positioned within a grid. Müller-Brockmann explains the traditional Dido system, used mainly in continental Europe, and the Anglo-American point system, which is prevalent in the UK and North America.
Points, right, like font sizes.
Exactly. The key thing to understand is that the point is the smallest unit of measurement in both. Think of points as the tiny building blocks of text. Just like a carpenter uses millimeters or inches, designers use points to precisely control the size of letters and the space around them within the grid.
Got it.
He also mentions the historical use of the Cicero in the Dido system that was a larger unit, about 12 points, and the ongoing efforts, even then, to introduce the metric system into typography for better international consistency.
So points and Ciceros were the traditional rulers of the typographic world, and now there's a move towards metric. After measurement, what about the actual letters themselves? Typefaces.
Right, typefaces are the fundamental visual elements that actually fill the grid. Müller-Brockmann briefly discusses the evolution of type design, mentioning several historical typefaces as examples. Classics like Garamond and Castellan.
Yes, familiar names.
Known for their readability and body text. Then the more sharply defined Baskerville and Bodoni, the bold block serif Clarendon, the clean sans serif Berthold, and the widely used Times New Roman, originally designed for newspaper printing.
So what does Müller-Brockmann emphasize about these different styles in the context of a grid?
Well, he highlights their inherent characteristics and their typical applications. For instance, a highly readable typeface like Garamond, when used within a well-structured grid, will make long blocks of text much more inviting and, less tiring to read.
Oh, okay.
A more decorative typeface, maybe like Bodoni, might be used just for headlines to create visual impact within that same grid system.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding these qualities helps designers choose typefaces that work harmoniously with the grid structure and the intended message. So it's not just picking a font you like.
Right.
It's about choosing one that fits the purpose and the underlying framework.
That makes sense. Function informs form, even with typography. Next up, column width. It sounds straightforward, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just making a block of text a certain width.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Column width is critical for readability. Müller-Brockmann mentions a general guideline for longer texts, aiming for around, say, 10 words per line.
10 words, okay.
Yeah, that's considered a comfortable rhythm for the eye to follow. He explains that if a column is too wide, the reader can kind of lose their place when moving to the next line, and it can actually strain the eye.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's too narrow, the reading flow is constantly interrupted, which can hinder comprehension and even reduce memorization.
So forcing too much text into a narrow column or stretching it too wide, it actively hinders understanding.
Exactly. It's not just visually unappealing, it makes it harder to read. Think of it as dictating the pace of reading you want it to be comfortable and natural. And the ideal width is also related to the size of the typeface. Larger type generally needs a slightly wider column.
10 words per line. That's a useful rule of thumb to keep in mind. It's all about making the reading experience as smooth as possible. And then there's leading, which most people probably know is the space between lines of text, right?
That's right.
But you said it plays a crucial role in readability. How so?
Yes, indeed. Leading, or entre líneas, as it's called in the book, is absolutely vital.